Welcome to Wick-Splaining. My name is Chuck Wick, and with me I have my brother Paul Wick and our producer Kaleb. We are going to be discussing political issues on the local, state, federal levels.
Can I talk?
I'm the host, so I'll do as much talking as I want.
I'm not sure I enjoy that.
Well,
you can argue about who's going to do more talking later. We have a show to do.
We're brothers. We're going to argue.
That's fine, but the people on the other end don't want to hear you guys arguing right now. They'd rather hear about a good conversation that you guys have planned for them.
All right.
You're right, Kaleb. All right, Chuck. Well, let's get to the topics.
Okay, we have a great show planned for everybody today. Welcome to Wick-Splaining, where we drink and we know things.
Yeah!
The music from our intro and outro is by Desolate, a Dayton, Ohio area band. You can find them on Facebook and YouTube, not FaceTube, but Facebook and YouTube. Our topic today is the proposal.
And Apple Music.
Yes, and many other platforms, I'm sure. Our topic today is the proposal for expanding the college football playoff system. The current proposal is to expand to a 12-team format that allows first-round byes for the top 4 teams. This began in 1994 when a 25-member NCAA committee assigned to explore a college football playoff detailed on a... There was a committee that met in 1994 that their purpose was to decide what was going to happen with the college football playoff system, the idea to figure out who was going to be the national championship because... No one liked the current system.
Nobody likes the current system.
The bowls and, the AP just deciding who the national championship was.
Yes.
So basically they came together. They decided that they had a couple different proposals. The first one was that there was going to be a one-game championship that was then actually what was actually instilled was the BCS. Then the option B was a 4-team event that the Final Four tournament, basically. So 20 years later, they instilled this 4-team college football playoff. Following that, they had platforms for the 8-team and for 12-team. I think what's happened now is that the 8-team idea has just been thrown out, and right now they're going to go to the 12-team format. So basically what's happening is each would use a bracket that consists of a combination of automatic qualifiers and at-large berths, and the 12-teamer would grant first-round byes to the top 4 teams. That is what is being talked about right now. I got all this information from SportsIllustrated.com. So let's go into a little bit of discussion about this. Basically what we went from was the AP deciding who the national champion was based on votes, to a BCS program that was based on points that decided, 2 teams went to a national championship game and they played and whoever won that game won it. Now we're in a 4-team playoff system that is also decided based on a committee that's deciding based on points and their own opinions and things like that. The 12-team idea, I believe, takes less of the points and the opinions and bases it more on who wins their conferences, who wins outright. And, then basically we're getting qualifiers from conference champions. We're getting qualifiers from at-large bids. And then that will then build this 12-team playoff system, and that will then decide who the national champion is. I'm not really sure what the idea is that they're putting out there right now as far as how these 12 teams are going to play, as far as what bowl games are going to play in, because I'm sure based on the money aspect of it, there's no way they'll get rid of the bowl games altogether. There's way too much money in those. So they're going to have to then put it into the bowl games like they kind of do with the 4-team right now. So I'm going to hand it over to Kaleb since this was his topic. He decided that he wanted to do this. What's your opinion on this, Kaleb?
My boy Kaleb.
So
I was very happy when the college football went away from the BCS system over to the playoff system.
Okay.
I agree.
Obviously, with the BCS system, it was 1 and 2 every year, and it was not.
Right.
And it was basically who was undefeated. It didn't matter who they played. It just because obviously, and this is what really made me mad is when you have the SEC schools who, would always schedule a cupcake, the game right before the end of their season, and that was it.
Right.
They didn't have back then. They didn't have the championship, the conference championship game, and all that. So literally, you would have an Alabama playing the Sisters of Mary Poor the second game before the end of the year, decimating them, and basically they used a computer system to rate how good their performance was, and their performance was on the computer system was stellar. So it basically gave them such an advantage. Where you had Big Ten, who, and to our discredit, since I am a Big Ten supporter and fan, we always would schedule hard games towards the end of the season. We would always play our out-of-conference games the first 4 games of the year.
Right.
And then we'd jump into our Big Ten schedules. So you would have the Big Ten who would schedule their meat of their conference towards the end, and you'd have like teams like Ohio State and Michigan basically bashing each other to death at the end of the year. Right. Like we did back in 2006, I think it was, where it was 1 versus 2 for the final game of the year, and literally we got so beaten down that when we went to the BCS championship game, it was against Florida. We had, and it didn't do us any credit that Ted Ginn got hurt the first play of the game.
In the celebration after running the opening kickoff back for a touchdown,
we dogpiled him.
He basically sprains his ankle and he's out the rest of the game. Yeah,
right. Didn't do us any favors, but
but that was the year that Ohio State and Michigan were 1 and 2 when we played at the end of the season, and so that that set that up. Yes.
Yeah, but it comes down to it where the playoff system was a good idea. I think we've seen over the course of the year it does breed better competition, but I do think that the 4 teams is getting to a point where it's the same, at least the same 2 to 3 every year. Right. Like this is the first year we haven't had Clemson or Ohio State in it, at least one of those 2 teams. Right. But we've had, I think Alabama's been in every single one except for one, and obviously the playoff system started in 2015. Right. So we're now 7 years into it, or 6 years. 6 years, yeah. And Alabama's been in 5 of the 6.
Yeah. And they've won, 3 national championships?
They've won three of the 6
in that time frame?
Well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically it's been Ohio State won, Alabama, Clemson, Alabama, Clemson, Alabama, Clemson. Yep. Like it literally we haven't had any point where it's been any different team. Like I thought this year we would be the first time we'd have some chance, but then as of last night, we found out that yes, University of Cincinnati did a good job because they were able to kind of hang with Alabama, but they still weren't able to win. And then I don't know what happened last night with Michigan and Georgia, because Georgia looked like a completely different team than they did when they played Alabama.
Oh, they killed Michigan.
And they destroyed them.
It was not even a game. But and in my opinion, I don't think Cincinnati really hung with Alabama very well either. Well, I mean, that was kind of a blowout as well.
It was a blowout in terms of Cincinnati not being able to do what they need to do. Right. But I think if you watch college football and you understand Nick Saban as a coach, he played his game plan perfectly. He sat there, and the first drive that Cincinnati had, they were running no huddle, running the ball, and just basically blowing up Alabama. And Cincinnati gets in the red zone. Nick Saban calls a timeout. I don't know if Cincinnati never answered the timeout, because when they came back, it wasn't the Cincinnati team that was playing from earlier. Right. And it was crazy how that happened, because it was just like, wow. You saw like a complete momentum shift from Cincinnati to Alabama. Yeah. But my theory is, if they want to continue the playoff, we need to expand it so that we have equal representation from all of the Power Fives. I don't think it's right where you have 2 SEC schools, even though, they can make the argument that Big 12 didn't have a really good team this year, or Pac-12 didn't have a good team this year.
Oklahoma State wasn't that bad.
They weren't that bad, no.
And Utah wasn't that bad either.
No, exactly. Yeah. And that's my problem is I think to actually have a real national champion, you have to have equal representation from all of the Power Fives.
No, I agree. I think if you win your conference championship in those 5 divisions or conferences, you should be get an automatic bid to the playoff.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about, when you say the 5, you're talking about the ACC, SEC, Big 10, Big 12, and the Pac-12.
Yep.
So those 5 conferences always field competitive teams, always have, at least one team that could probably compete for a national championship on a regular basis. So, I mean, it makes sense to have those 5 teams or those 5 conference champions be involved. Now, I can tell you right now that there is a huge argument going on with the committees that are making this decision, that the other 5 conferences, basically the group of 5 conferences that they call them, the AAC, the Conference USA, the Mid-American, the Mid-Mountain West, and the Sun Belt, they are arguing that they should have a equal share in the playoffs. So basically their conference champion should be also getting an automatic bid. My issue with this is, if we have the Power 5 conferences, we have the group of 5 conferences. Now you've got 10 teams that are already automatic qualifiers. You only have 2 at-large bids, which we all know, if Notre Dame only has 1 or 2 losses that season, there's one bid.
Yep.
There's one at-large bid right there. That's always going to be in the playoff.
Yeah.
So now you've basically got one at-large bid that's left that, is going to be something that's going to be decided afterwards. Now, my only problem with that is, I would say probably a good 99% of the time, that's going to be some other SEC team. That, so in this case, if this was the year that they had decided that, you would have had Alabama and Georgia from the SEC that would have made the playoff. Even though Alabama won the conference championship, they would have pulled Georgia in as that other at-large. So now you're looking at a situation where, Michigan won the Big Ten because of the upset win over Ohio State.
Right.
Now Ohio State still doesn't get a chance to get in, even though there's an at-large bid out there. They're still not getting a chance to get in, and so there's still always going to be problems with it, no matter how you break it down. Even when you go to the 12 teams, I mean, unless you put together a 64-team playoff like basically the basketball side of this does, you're not going to include everybody that's possibly going to be competitive enough to win a national championship. So that's the issue I have with that. With automatic qualifiers is the idea that if you take the conference championship from all 10 conferences, you're now only at 2, which, like I said before, really only puts you at 1, because, like I said, if Notre Dame only has 1 or 2 losses, they're going to get that automatic. They're going to get that at-large bid, and so you're at 1 at-large bid.
So, and that's where I think obviously I see where the group of 5 have their point of view, but the side of me that wants competition doesn't think they need to. And I mean, and maybe it's the whole problem of they are Division I FBS schools, but it's like I was talking to my friend yesterday when watching the Alabama and Cincinnati game. If you look at the Alabama team, if they were mostly seniors and juniors, most of them are going to find a home in the NFL. That's how good they are.
Right.
If you look at the Cincinnati team, maybe 1 or 2. And that's
their quarterback is going to the NFL, but I mean, outside of that, there's not a whole lot of other players that.
And that's the thing is when you have a team like that going up against a team like, and even look at Ohio State. Let's not even compare Alabama. Look at Ohio State. Ohio State currently has 3 people who are sitting out from the Rose Bowl right now, who are surefire top 10 picks, or at least top 20 picks. I can't look at Cincinnati and go, there's at least 5 or 6 top 20s there, or top 32s,
right?
Or I can't look at the team that had the issue a couple years ago, UCF, where they said, hey, we're 13-0, we didn't get a playoff bid,
right?
I don't know any UCF players, maybe except for like a lineman or a wide receiver who maybe got into the NFL, but I don't know if they're still playing. And that's my problem. Is I understand they would think they need to have representation, which Maybe they do, but I think if we go to a 12-team playoff, I think it needs to be the winners of the Power Fives of their conferences. It needs to be the highest ranked via the AP and coaches poll of the non-Power Fives. Just that one, because that one team has proved that, hey, maybe they have a shot. And then the other ones need to be high-ranked Power 5 teams. So in the case of like Ohio State or Georgia, they'll get in, but don't have them meeting the team they lost to until maybe the semifinals, if need be. Because I mean, if you look at the basketball tournament, you would have teams like Duke and North Carolina. They're on opposite fields of the tournament bracket, so that they're not playing each other until later on.
Right, not until at least the Sweet 16.
Right, Sweet 16 or even the Elite Eight.
Elite Eight, yeah.
They're not going to have them facing each other in the round of 32 or the round of 64.
No, of course not.
That would be stupid.
Not unless one team was really horrible that year.
Right. Yeah. Duke is number 1 and North Carolina is number 16 in the same bracket. I've never seen that happen.
Yeah, that would be a farce for sure.
But that's my interpretation of it. And obviously you have the naysayers who are like, top 4 is fine because we got to worry about the kids and their schedules and their breaks. Last time I checked, college ends usually right around the first week of December and doesn't reconvene until at least the second week of January, and some don't even go back until after Martin Luther King Day.
Right.
So the whole, we have to worry about their finals doesn't float with me, because we've already extended at least the most Power Fives have already extended their conference schedule out to at least the first week of December for the conference championship game. Now, obviously, that's only including 2 teams, but still, that's two teams, or that's 2 universities
across
who are
10 different conferences, and you're actually talking about 20 teams now.
Exactly. So, I think it's when they sit there and go, we have to worry about the finals and their schedule. Okay, so football, you have to worry about that, but basketball, we're going to throw it right during the middle of the spring semester, right towards the end of the spring semester, and we're talking 72 teams now. I think they've expanded it to, because you have the first 4 that play on Tuesdays,
but that puts it at 68.
Okay, maybe it's 68 then. Yeah, but I know you have 68 teams. That's 68 universities, who at least for the first week are not paying attention to finals or classwork, or if they are, it's during the.
But I think a lot of colleges also, the March Madness is scheduled. I think where it starts is right around their spring break. From school. So I mean, you're also have that. But I mean, we all know and I don't mean to put anybody down with the statement, but we all know that the greatest players in college aren't really focused on studies. Let's put it that way.
No, you're true.
They're taking the courses that they have to take to be able to compete in their sport. And getting the grades that they have to get to be able to compete. So we're not. There are some. Don't get me wrong. There are some athletes that are very good scholars as well. There's the scholar athlete. Is a big thing. They give awards for that and everything as well. But that also should tell you something, is that the fact that we have to give an award for a scholar athlete tells me that there's not too many of them out there that are focused on getting a 4.0 in their classes, as well as being a successful athlete on the field. So,
I mean, obviously you have some football players who, they go, like, obviously, more recently had Braxton Miller, who stayed for his 5th year, and his 5th year senior. Obviously, he was done with classwork before the football season started, so he already graduated, but he still had that 5th year of eligibility. He was doing real estate. He got his real estate license. And you got some who
wasn't he taking graduate level classes though? I think you have to be enrolled.
Yeah,
in
he was enrolled
classes.
still, but he had his bachelor's already.
Right.
But you got some people who do focus on that, but the majority of them are they're
right.
And like I've explained to people, they are there to basically hone their craft and to basically make sure that they can get into the NFL. That is
Right.
their overall goal.
The highest level players, yes.
They're not
that's what their goal is.
focusing on if I can get my bachelor's in chemical engineering.
Right.
There might be some, but I doubt they're ones who are looking at the
probably
NFL.
A lot of liberal arts and communications degrees and stuff like that. Not the technical degrees.
You had the one NFL player back in 2020 who he has his doctorate, and he basically gave up his season to go up to Canada, I think, and be a doctor for a whole year to help out with COVID cases. So I mean, you have some.
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, I think he's Minnesota Viking player, but
really,
yeah.
But I mean,
obviously, he chose education as well as football at the same time, and then you have obviously like Alexandro Villanueva, and I probably butchered his name,
right?
Who
Alessandro Villanueva.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, he went to a service school, but he did his time, got his.
He served in the army, yes.
Yeah, but
and he went to West Point, I believe.
But I'm just saying he went to and that's another thing is if you've got Army who had a good season this year, they got their butts handed to them by Navy, but this is the first year they were ranked, and they could make an argument saying, hey, why are we not representing? Because obviously we don't have a conference because of
they're an independent school, just like Notre Dame.
Yeah. So, and obviously Notre Dame is one who could always make an argument, but my problem is with Notre Dame, you have every other sport in the ACC except for football.
They make too much money as an independent,
and that's the thing
to align themselves with a conference.
These schools who sit there and say we want to stick to 4 bowl game or 4 semifinal game or 2 semifinal games with 4 teams, you can't tell me they want to do that because of any other reason other than money. Because I'm sorry, if you expanded it to 12 and used all of the big bowls, that's a good payday for every single university that's attending that.
Right.
I mean, you're talking. Last night we had 3 bowl games, which obviously 2 are the 2 semifinals. Today you have 3 that are part of the New Year's 6, which obviously 3 last night, 3 tonight. So there's 12 teams right there because there's 6 games.
Right.
And all of them are all the major bowls. None of them are, Smedley Ford, Alamo Bowl or anything like that. I guess Alamo Bowl might be big, actually. I don't know. But you don't have any of them being small bowls.
The Tire Discounters Bowl and the Bob's Transmission Bowl, and they have so many bowls now. It's like, what is there, like 35, 40 of them or something?
I think they start December 12th. I think that's the first bowl game, and it goes all the way until January 10th, which is the national title game.
Right.
Which the national title game is always sponsored by wherever it's located at. Which I think this year it's at the Chargers and Rams Stadium, I think. SoFi Stadium, I think it's where it's at.
I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure. Yeah. But it just goes to show you, college football for the universities is a money game. And now, and especially now with at least with some states, I don't know if every state's legalized it yet, but with the name, image, and likeness, NIL, these players could be making serious money off of their name and all that kind of stuff during the bowl games. And the schools could make a hefty payday too. Yeah. I mean, that's why Sisters of Mary Poor plays Alabama. They're not playing them because they think they have a chance to win. No, they're paying them. They're playing them because Alabama is going to pay that school a crap ton of money to lose, basically.
Right. Just to show up, basically.
But that money goes to enrollment, goes to help out the school, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So
they're not going to turn down that opportunity.
I mean, that's kind of why I think what's the team we always play? We always play one local Ohio school.
Yeah, Ohio State always plays like Akron or Youngstown State or one of those schools. It's another Ohio school that's usually not at the same level as them, but they usually play that team the first, second game of the season, and it's kind of a ramp-up game. It's like, okay, we're going to get out there and we're going to get all our players some time on the field against a team that we pretty much know we're going to beat. No matter who we put on the field, we know we're going to win that game, and it gives them that game time experience to be able to get out there and play. It shows because, when you have freshmen players at quarterback or running back like Ohio State did this year.
Yeah,
they needed those games at the beginning of the season to get themselves into game form, and had they not had those kind of lower level games, and they'd started off right into the Big Ten schedule, things may have been different. There may have been some losses in there to teams they shouldn't lose to.
I mean, we played Akron this year. Or who?
I can't remember who.
But it was the fourth game, and Stroud sat out because Stroud just needed to recover from being beat up by Oregon's defense and Tulsa's defense. And we had and it was allowed us to see our second string quarterback, which I think helped.
Yeah, I think McCord is actually a good quarterback, and I think he could be serviceable in the future too. So I mean, I think that's a good way of looking at it. There's another aspect of this I want to talk about as well. So I'm going to go into this as well. It says, also there is some talk from coaches that the regular season would need to be shortened to accommodate the additional playoff games. Adding playoff games without adjusting the regular schedule would take away open dates, the week between conference championships and bowls, starting and would most likely make the players have to show up earlier in the year to start preparing. So basically what they're saying is that we're adding in these playoff games. If you got 12 teams, now you're talking about several weeks of just dealing with playoffs. And you're going to have all of these extra games that fill in for these teams. So now you're talking about having to start earlier in the season, preparing. You're going to have more games throughout the season. You're going to have less time off in between games, in between the end of the season and bowl games, because a lot of teams, especially the more competitive teams, the more the higher level teams, get a pretty good break between their conference championship and when they play their bowl games. It's usually 3-4 weeks.
Yeah, I mean,
they get time to prepare and all this stuff. But you're going to have to take a lot of that out when you add in all of these additional playoff games that they're going to have to play. So you're talking about 3-4 weeks of playoff games before you get to the national championship. So I agree to a certain extent that I think that the schedule is going to have to be shortened because of that. I think right now you're at like 12 games when you include the conference championships.
13.
And so you're going to have to probably dial that back to about 10 games. You may have to take one or two of those games away to make that possible.
I mean, so here's my counterpoint to that. A lot of the players in the Power Fives are hoping to get into the NFL at some point. And if they are wanting to do that, a good example is this year as well as last year. You only have one team who gets a bye. So that one team is the only team that gets a rest between the end of the season and the playoffs. Right. And this year they have 17 games instead of 16 games. So they're adding an extra game into there, and they're going as soon as that game's over. I think the first set of wild card is on Saturday. So you finish the season on Sunday. You only got, by NFL rules, you had to take Monday off. So you only got Tuesday through Friday to prep if you are one of those teams.
Right.
And obviously, if you are one of the teams in the top or in the 12-team playoff, I think it's just good, momentum to get your stuff going again. Honestly, I don't think it's. I don't like the. I mean, maybe going down to 10 games might be feasible, but I don't unless you just focus on just in conference play and not out of conference play. I don't think you can do it.
Well, and that may be what happens then. Yeah. You're going to have to get rid of some of the out of conference games to make it possible. But I mean, I think that adjusting the schedule is something that's going to happen based on just the fact that you're adding so many games to the end of the season.
Right.
And I understand your comparison with the NFL, but the problem or the difference is that the NFL, these players, the sole reason for living is football.
Right.
Your college, it's not your sole reason for living. You've got to take
going to school
classes. You've got to be involved in everything to do with that university. So it's not It's not, just I'm a football player and that's
Right.
it. When you get to the NFL level, you're being paid lots of money.
Right.
Your entire life from about July or August all the way through to January is football.
All right.
And that's it. And they have that entire off season also to recover from injuries, to get themselves prepared for the next season, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
like I said, I agree with that. I'm doing the math in my head while you were talking. So we had the New Year's Six Bowls, which obviously that would fill the 12 teams. So then you take next week, that would be down to 6 teams, so you'd be 3 bowls, and then you'd be down to well, if you do 12 teams, you'd have to have 2 buys, wouldn't you?
it says 4.
4 buys.
Yeah, the first round buys would go to the top 4 teams.
Okay.
That's the way it's proposed.
Because that would, because I'm sitting here going, wait a minute. If you go from 12 teams, then you go down to 6 teams, then you go down to 3, and I'm like, wait a minute, one's gonna have to have a bye, and how do you decide that before the final? So I'm like, okay, so maybe it makes sense if you go down to, so basically it would be top 4 would have a bye, and then 5 through 12 would play each other, which that'd still be weird because that'd be 7 teams, wouldn't it? 5
No,
through
I mean
12?
you got the 4 teams that are a bye.
Yeah.
Then you've got 8 teams that are
8,
playing. So that waters down to 4 of those. And then
4
you've
bowls,
got 8 teams that are playing.
Yeah.
Which then goes to 4, then to 2.
Okay.
So that's how the format would work. That's why they would have the 4 teams. They couldn't do 2 because then you would end up with an odd number of teams.
Yeah.
So they have to do 4 with a 12 team. That's
Yep.
and it's what the NFL used to do before they added the extra wild card.
Yep.
A few years ago, and it used to be 2 teams on each side.
Yep.
Each conference who had a bye, and you had the rest of the teams playing on wild card. Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the same format. Our idea is they're kind of going to this idea of what the NFL was doing. So, I mean,
I think
I understand the idea, and I understand them trying to make it a little bit closer to what the NFL does. Because these players, like you said earlier, they're, at least the top NFL or college players are trying to get into the NFL.
Right.
So you're looking at players that's their goal. So making it more like that is a different thing. But there are 119 Division I football teams, and each carries 70 to 100 players. This works out to approximately 10,000 college football players. The NFL each year has 7 rounds where 32 teams pick 1 player per round. This is 224 players out of nearly 10,000 that even have a chance to play professional football.
Yeah.
Okay, that not all those players even end up being signed to long-term contracts. Even the ones that get drafted, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed a long-term contract with any NFL team. So the rest of these players are getting an education, planning for their future off the playing field.
Right.
They're not looking at the NFL as a career. They're looking at, what am I going to do when I get done with all of this? So you have to take in consideration that when you're comparing this to the NFL, you're comparing a very small portion of college football players that are going to go to the NFL. And the rest of them, you will have nothing to do with football again.
Right.
Or maybe in a coaching type of atmosphere they'll get into. But I mean, at the most, they're not. That's going to be the most they're going to get into as a coaching or something. So
Right. Well, I mean, you got like Brian Hartline, who's currently the wide receivers coach for Ohio State. He made it to the professionals, played a couple of years, retired, and became a coach. I mean, like I said, I guess if that's what he wants to do, that's a dream job, obviously.
Right.
But obviously, that's neither here or there talking about playoffs. But like I said, I honestly think, and it's not just as of this year, but it's been a couple of the past couple of years where we've had teams like Clemson, like Alabama, who are always in there. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, I want fresh blood. Like, I want to see, and I thought this, like I said, I thought this year was the year we would have that opportunity to see, but, you know, for some reason, maybe it's just the way Kirby Smart prepped and the way Nick Saban taught him how to prep.
Yeah.
But it seemed like Georgia had every answer for Michigan, and Alabama had every answer for Cincinnati. I
understand why Cincinnati was put into the playoff based on the fact that they were undefeated and they beat Notre Dame and that was their only big win. And they didn't have any other big wins. Right. But I think the committee, and obviously the committee always consists of at least one athletic director and then a bunch of former current athletic directors and people from outside. I honestly think the committee did not want to have another UCF incident where you have a team who is undefeated and they're basically left out of the playoff for a team who has 1 loss or 2 losses, because the next team up would have been Notre Dame, and Notre Dame had 2 losses. Right. If it wasn't going to be Notre Dame, it was going to be Ohio State. Right. Which, how do you put Ohio State in the 4th slot to play Alabama when their last game that everyone saw them in was being slaughtered by Michigan? Right. You can't. I mean, you could do it, but the optics would have been horrible. Right. And then you can't put Notre Dame ahead of Cincinnati when Notre Dame lost to Cincinnati. The question is that what would have been more competitive? Would Ohio State in that position playing against Alabama would have been more competitive against Alabama, or is Cincinnati in that situation more competitive with Alabama? Right. My opinion, a 2-loss Ohio State team still would have been more competitive against Alabama than an undefeated Cincinnati team. I agree. And I think that's what the committee is looking at. Not necessarily are they looking at records, but they're looking at who has a chance of winning this, you know? And I don't mean to be, I even went to UC myself. So don't get me wrong. I'm not a homer. I root for UC. I love the school, but
you have a nephew that goes to UC, so yeah.
And it's just I would not have been.
Or does he go to Xavier?
He goes to Xavier.
Okay.
But I would not have been one who would have voted for Cincinnati to be in the playoff just because I don't feel like they would have been competitive, and I think that was shown by how they played against Alabama. Right. And that's just that's my opinion solely. I don't want to say that that opinion belongs to anyone else. That's my opinion. But I think
his opinion does not matter to Wick-Splaining as a whole. Right. But it is shared by 2 of the 3 members of Wick-Splaining.
Yes. So, and to go on to the next thing I have written here, there are analysts that say that the playoffs would become watered down if we add this many teams. The playoffs should be difficult to get in, and adding teams to the playoff lengthens the season and allows more games for players to get injured. This isn't pro football and should be kept separate from it, not mirroring its setup. So basically what they're saying there is we need to take in consideration these are amateur players, and they're still trying to build a career going forward. Playing more games, playing more often with less breaks, puts them in a situation where they could get injured. And this is not pro football. Pro football, these players are getting paid a lot of money to go play all these games. And if they get injured, they get injured. It's just it's the nature of the game. But it's a lot easier to deal with being injured when you're still living on a $40 million contract as opposed to a college player who gets injured and now they got nothing. They're not living on any contract. They have no money coming in as a college player. So there's a vast difference there, and I think that needs to be considered in the playoff format.
And with you just mentioning that, obviously this week being an Ohio State fan, we were looking pretty good going into the game with Utah. But then on Tuesday, it was made public that Garrett Smith was going to opt out.
Garrett Wilson was
going to opt out.
Chris Olave.
And Chris Olave was right after him. Those are two of our top 3 receivers. You know, obviously they played all year long, and then 4 days before the game, you're telling the offensive strategy to just change everything, because now you're going down to just one starter receiver, even though our backups are pretty good. They haven't played all year. And one running back, and then telling CJ Stroud, a true freshman, hey, buddy, game's all on you.
But and now all you have is Smith and Jigba as your sole
star wide receiver.
You know, and you've had 3 all season. 3 of the best receivers in the country all season.
I was going to say, Garrett Wilson's projected to go in the top 5, and Olave is projected to go in the top 15 in the NFL draft.
They will both be in the first round.
And
I'm not angry with them for opting out, because I feel like...
That was my point, was, as you just mentioned, you know, they're opting out, and I had to explain this to my mom. They're opting out because their future is in the NFL. They know they're going to get drafted. They're going to get drafted high. Which obviously, I think it was the collective bargaining agreement a few years ago, where depending on your draft pick is what your starting rookie contract is going to be. If Olave and Garrett played and got hurt,
that could
jeopardize their future and their draft stock. And the last thing I would want, and then this would be me being a selfish fan for Ohio State, was, you know, get out there and play. I don't care, but they're looking after their future. It's just like with me, if I had an opportunity at a job, and my current job says, well, I need you to go and do this, and it could jeopardize my future standing with a new job. I'm not going to do that, because I'm looking at my future. I'm looking at what my potential is in the future.
Especially if you're looking at a huge pay increase or something, you know, you're not going to jeopardize that pay increase. And that's what they're looking at. They're going from being college players to being drafted and probably in the top 15 of the draft, which you're talking about multi-million-dollar deals here. You're talking about multi-year multi-million-dollar
And we
deals.
had, obviously, a couple years ago, Ohio State had a coach, which I won't name, but people knew. If you're an Ohio State person, you're going to know. He would sit there and say, I don't care what your draft stock is. You're part of the team. You signed on to be a team. You play for the team. Well, then we got another coach who came in and basically, you know, he talks to all of his players about their draft potential and says, hey, if you have a shot, I will back you 100% and tell you to go take that shot. And he basically was like, okay, yeah. I mean, if you know, we had obviously our defensive lineman 3 years ago who now plays on the Washington football team, who basically he saw that, hey, I'm going to be a number 1 or number 2 pick. I don't want to get hurt, because that's the problem, especially like with a wide receiver. Not saying college players are dirty, but if you know that you're going up against someone that maybe can get in the NFL and make money, are you not going to be targeting him a little bit more?
It's going to make you look better if you can shut him down.
Exactly.
So you're going to do whatever you can to shut him down, which may end up being some dirty tactics involved in that.
And that's what that's why I don't. Like I said, me being a selfish Ohio State fan, I want them to play. But me being a person who knows that, hey, they're looking after their future, I'm okay with them opting out, and I understand where that guy is coming from. Where he's like, you know, if it could water the system down. You have more opt-outs. I can understand that. I mean, like I said,
the idea is that they don't want to, you know, I mean, they're trying to get away from getting hurt. They're also looking at a game that honestly doesn't really mean anything. You know, they're not playing I think if they were playing in the playoff and had a chance at a national championship, those players wouldn't have opted out. They would have stayed and they would have played. But you're talking about a game, the Rose Bowl against Utah, that honestly doesn't mean anything to the season. You know, it's just another game, you know, and these players are looking at it as, why am I going to take this chance of getting hurt in a game where it means absolutely nothing, you know? And even all the way up through the Michigan game, when you're talking about Ohio State, those games still meant something because it was still a possibility of making the national championship.
Exactly.
Now that's done, no chances. Now you're looking at a game that means nothing to.
Nope. It's all bragging rights now.
Yeah, it's all just winning the Rose Bowl and possibly ending the season in that top like maybe 3 or 4 ranking in the AP and all of that. But I mean, otherwise you're not going to get anywhere other than that. So it really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, like I said, if our team was in the playoffs, I could see Olave and Garrett and a lot of the other people maybe playing. Mm-hmm. But like you mentioned, it's the Rose Bowl. Like, I mean, the Rose Bowl still has, for a lot of Big Ten people, it still means a lot because it is the granddaddy of them all, and it was always Big Ten versus Pac-12. So it is one of those where it has a little bit of nostalgia, but at the same time, I mean, going back to just talking about Ohio State and not the playoff, at the beginning of the year when I saw our lineup and saw how many young people we had, I honestly would have been happy just finishing the season with a winning record. Mm-hmm. I had no idea we could go 10-2. I thought, especially after the game against Oregon, I was like, "Well, phone this in. We're going to go 6-6, and that's it."
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be that bad, but I wouldn't have been surprised if we had 3 or 4 losses. Yeah, by the end of the season.
And that's my biggest issue right now is with the current playoff system and not having an automatic bid if you win your conference championship. It makes every game feel for the whole season as if a title eliminator. And I think that puts a little too much stress on the players and the coaching staff. Yeah. Because, unless you're in Alabama or Ohio State, which Ohio State finished 6th in the nation at the final poll before the final games. Right. Alabama obviously lost early on to Texas A&M, but somehow still finished number 1 in the nation.
That was the win over Georgia in the SEC championship is what it did that.
And, we lost to Oregon at the second game of the season. Mm-hmm. It still finished up that. But you have other teams who, if they lose to those teams, count them out. They're not going to get in the top 15, top 20 ever again. Right. And that's what makes me just kind of not happy with the way the system is, because it just makes it feel like even knowing, Big Ten has a lot of tradition, SEC has a lot of tradition in their games. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of trophies they play for. The game should be fun. Like, when you look at the NFL, for an example. Okay, your team loses to the Patriots 1 week, and then you're playing them this week. Mm-hmm. If you win them, you win your division. And it's not like you guys didn't lose when you played them the first time, and you're like, well, season's over. We have no shot of getting to the finals now.
Right. I mean, I'm a Bills fan, and the Bills are 9-6 right now. Yep. And they're still in the leading the division because of the win over the Patriots. Yep. And now they're in a possibility of being in the top 4 of the playoff rankings as well. So, I mean, like you said, they've lost 6 games, and they're still in the running to make the Super Bowl. Yep. There's even analysts that are still picking them as a favorite to still make the Super Bowl. Yep.
I at least have them going to the divisional round. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that I would actually be very surprised if it doesn't end up being Kansas City and Buffalo again for the AFC Championship.
I'm talking about, like I said, the college way. Mm-hmm. I think it feels that it's just too much of it's, instead of being any given Sunday or Saturday technically for college. Mm-hmm. Every game just feels like it's a title eliminator, and I think that puts way too much pressure on kids who are there for school, not for sport. Right, sports their work
should be secondary.
Should be their secondary. Right, and I think that is probably a lot of our culture has happened with that. Like, our culture has demanded this. Yeah, and I think we need, as a culture and as the governing body of the NCAA, they need to look at it as and like I said, they are looking at it as a business, so it makes sense that they are trying to force it that way. But like I said, I think it's the way they look at it as a business, but they also look at it as, before the NIL came out, it was, well, they're college kids, they're getting free board, they're getting free books and tuition. We don't need to worry about them. Where you're this university sitting there packing billions of dollars away, or not really billions, but millions of dollars away,
at least.
And they're not sharing it with them, but yet you're putting all that pressure on them that, hey, you have to go out there and you have to win this week. If you don't, we're not going to get to a bowl game.
Right. Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, it does take some pressure off. I mean, it allows teams that, maybe with 1, 2, or 3 losses to still be able to make the playoff, because if you win your conference championship, then you still have that opportunity.
I mean, last year we had a losing record team in the NFC East make it to the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously college probably wouldn't have that happen.
No, not likely. But
But it's one of those things where it's like, if you weren't forcing the topic that every single game counts and matters and has to matter,
right,
that might allow us to have, because that's the thing is if you look at the top 10, all of them are at least 2 lost teams.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous that you're putting that much pressure on a team that say, well, you can't have any, like, everyone sat there and was like, well, that's a one lost team. They're not going to get in the playoff.
Right.
And that's like kind of stupid, because it's like, look at the 2 teams who are in the final right now. They both have 1 losses.
Yeah.
I mean, the one loss to the one loss in Georgia's column is to Alabama, and the one loss to Alabama is Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's crazy, but that's the way I think it should be. Like, if there's an undefeated team, that's awesome. But at the same time, I think if there's a loss, 1 loss or 2 loss team, I think that's a little bit better, because it shows a little adversity that they had to face and they had to overcome. And I think that would make a better story for a playoff, honestly.
Right. So the last point I wanted to cover on this is that the current playoff contract is going through 2025, but if they can get this approved very soon, they may be able to make this into effect by 2023. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea to push it through that quickly. I think there needs to be some more talk about how it's going to be done, what bowl games are involved, and things like that. So I think maybe the idea should be that if it is approved, it should be pushed out to that 2026 season, and that's when the 12 teams should start. That's just my opinion. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I for some reason that 2025 number is coming up a lot.
I think a lot of the college contracts right now are set at the 2025.
They are. Like, that's when Texas and Oklahoma are jumping to the SEC. That's when University of Cincinnati, Tulsa, UCF, and there's one BYU are joining the Big 12. So maybe I don't know, maybe that's when they're doing a bunch of contract structuring. But obviously, within these conference changes, if the school wants to go earlier, they can, but they have to pay a huge buyout to the current conference.
Right.
I think like Texas and Oklahoma, the buyout with the Big 12 is like $25 million. Which I'm like, if you have a school that can pay that, then you better be paying your staff a lot better,
Well, and those schools can't afford it. They make a lot of money on football.
Oh, God, they do.
Especially anywhere down there in the South. The South is huge for football, just like the Midwest is for the Big Ten. So, I mean, they have the money. It's just whether it's necessary to pay it or not. I mean, in my opinion, I think you should just wait out the contract you're on, allow all of this stuff to settle and figure out what is going to happen, and then move into it when the contracts are done. I mean, that's how it would be done in the NFL. You wouldn't get out of a contract. The contract would be whatever it is.
Right, which obviously contract with NFL. NFL just signed that massive one with DirecTV for like $100 billion for the next 10 years for NFL ticket. So, which, like I said, that's NFL, not college. But I think if they want to do, I would honestly, 2025 would be the year I would think that you need to look at it and structure it. But if they want to leave the 4-team as needed for that year and wait until the dust settles for the restructuring of the SEC, because obviously SEC is adding 2 teams. They're not losing anybody. Right. They already have 14 teams, so that's now 16 teams. Which I don't know how you're like. Are you gonna shift 2 other teams to the SEC East? Because Oklahoma and Texas are both on the west side of the states, especially for their conference area. Right. So I'm like, how's that going to play out with their obviously they're going to restructuring, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they're going to have to. I think they're going to have to do something to restructure it, just like the Big Ten did when they added the teams, Rutgers and Maryland and all that stuff.
Which that's a whole another podcast we can talk.
Yeah. I still would love to see the Big Ten be able to get Notre Dame into them. I think that would be huge, but it's just not something they've been able to work out.
Yeah, I mean, and then like I said, you got the SEC reshuffling. You're gonna have the Big 12 reshuffling, and obviously those are only two conferences we know about. There might be something that happens down the line with the Big Ten. I think someone has said when those four teams leave the American Athletic Conference, they might get sucked up into the ACC. The teams that are remaining, so we'll see. But
yeah, there's not going to be that many left, actually.
I think they only have 8 teams altogether, so they're losing almost half their teams.
Right.
BYU obviously is their Sunbelt or something like they're nothing.
I'm not really sure.
They're Mountain West. They're
Mountain West, yeah.
So yeah, they're not even part of the American Athletic Conference. So, but there's a lot of restructuring that has to go. So
yeah.
I think wait till 2025, keep everything as is till then, even though it's going to suck for the next couple of years probably.
It's only 3 more years, basically.
3 more years.
Yeah,
but then
it's not a big deal.
Then you can make the changes you need to in 2026 to make the stuff actually be more meaningful, I think.
Yeah. And like I said, I think it takes pressure off the teams. I think adding more teams to it, allows for teams with 1, 2, or 3 losses to have a much better chance of getting into the playoff. And I think that also, like you said, takes the pressure off the players so that they can, focus on their studies a little more as well. So, all right. Well, did you have anything else you wanted to discuss on this?
I don't.
Okay.
Do you want to put some bets on, or not bets, but predictions on the national championship?
I mean, just being an Ohio State fan, I have a extreme hatred for Alabama. So just, my heart wants to say that Georgia is going to win it just because that's really what I want to happen.
Right.
Anytime I can see Alabama go down is definitely something I'm happy about. So, my prediction is that Georgia wins the national championship.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm right there with you. It pained me yesterday having to cheer for Michigan. Yeah. Because I'm like, I don't like. This is just me as a Big Ten fan. I can't stand the SEC conference as a whole. I just think they're.
Same here.
I don't like them. Yep. I think they're the media darling way too much, and I think they just get that credit for it. But, I was talking to people earlier today that 4 years ago we had the title game was Georgia versus Alabama, and Bama won in overtime. And I think Kirby Smart has learned from that game, and I think he's going to make the adjustments that he needs to, and I think it's going to be Georgia. It's going to be close. I think it'll be close because I think Georgia learned a lot from their loss earlier. Yeah, and just looking at the prep of the two teams that played, I think Georgia looked way better than Alabama did.
I could see it coming down to a final play, kind of like the Iron Bowl a few years ago with Alabama and Auburn, and the field goal that missed, and it's run back for a touchdown. Coming down to a final play like that, I could see it doing something like that because they're very closely matched teams, and I think that it's gonna be a dogfight.
It will be,
and the only thing I don't like about the entire thing is that the last thing I wanted to see was another all SEC national championship.
Right.
I would,
and especially a rematch of the actual SEC title game.
Exactly. And I don't think the playoff committee wanted that. I think that's why they seeded the teams the way they did. Yep. Is that they were hoping that there would be another team that would enter in, and honestly, I think the only team that had an opportunity to do that was Michigan. Yeah. And they just didn't show up for that game against Georgia. So
Harbaugh, and no discredit to the players, I don't think Harbaugh had his team prepped right. Yeah. Because you had Michigan as a whole had the number 1 defense in the nation, had the top 2 defensive linebackers, and Georgia just handled them like they weren't even there.
Well, that defensive end on Michigan is going to be he's going to be an NFL star. Yeah, he's going to be an NFL star. He tore up that Ohio State offensive
Yes,
line.
he did.
That's the main reason why Michigan won that game against Ohio State, was because they just could not stop him. He was in on Stroud like on every play.
He was,
And it was just
if
ridiculous.
Stroud tried to pass, the other defensive end would they would just basically pinch the whole line and basically shut him down.
Yeah.
But they weren't there yesterday. Like
I don't
hear,
know what happened. I don't
didn't
know
hear
why.
them get called at all on any play.
I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he's hurt. I don't know what the situation is, but you know, he wasn't the same player he was against Ohio State, and even in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah.
He wasn't the same player against Georgia that he was against any of those teams. So, you know, but anyway, well, that was today's topic. I hope you enjoyed our candid conversation. If you have any comments about our conversation today, please email us at wick.splaining@gmail.com. And even Donnie has something to say.
Like, share, and subscribe.
Subscribe. All right.
And just to wrap that up, you can find us on Anchor, Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.